out the Wilwood Tactical Extreme TX6R front big brake kit with the 16-inch slotted rotors and the red calipers fitting on 2019 and newer Ram 1500s. Now this kit has everything that your truck needs to complete a front brake kit and to make a huge impact on your braking performance for higher horsepower builds and heavier applications, like when you're doing any heavier towing or if you have any super tough armor on your truck. Now, if you're tough on your truck and find that you need to replace your brakes a bit more often, or even have noticed that you need some extra bite to get your truck to stop safely, this kit is going to be a well-built choice to consider. Now, I want to note right up front that 20-inch wheels or larger are required to run this kit, so just keep that in mind when you're checking this out. This kit has some notable features compared to standard factory-sized kits across the board, including a large 16-inch two-piece rotor, a 6-piston bright red caliper for each side, and high-performance brake pads. Starting with the rotors, as you can see, it's split up into two pieces. The actual rotor portion here that contacts the pad is slotted for a clean and a smooth surface during operation for ideal contact, and has a high vane capacity in the center here for a high level of cooling. Now the hat portion bolted to the rotor, this is super lightweight as far as the construction is concerned, which is going to minimize the rotational mass on the front, making it easier to stop, and doing all of that while maintaining strength when it's bolted to the rotor as well as the hub. Now the caliper is the brightest of the components on the table with a sporty red powder coat that you really can't miss. It's going to have an increase in pistons, 6 to be exact, as I mentioned before, which also helps with the stopping force. Now what will go inside the caliper, the pads here, these have a specific compound for heavier loads or higher speeds and ultimately higher heat applications. They have a low dust, low noise, and a low wear rate, which is optimal characteristics for a high performance pad, still remaining comfortable, clean, and long lasting. Diving into the specifics of the build and the construction, starting off with the rotor again, the outer portion here is made of an iron material for a high wear resistance, even under sustained heat, and the hat is made of an aluminum material, and the webbing here, or the ribbing on the outside of this hat, is going to increase the structural integrity of the rotor, and the entire system has an E-coating, a black E-coating to be specific, to resist any corrosion, and it's also going to add some sportiness behind the wheel. Now the calipers are also made of a forged billet aluminum construction. The pistons on the inside are made of stainless steel, which is going to prevent any corrosion or rust over time, and of course the red powder coat is there to protect the entire caliper. Now the pad is made of what's called a BPQ compound, which is a ceramic compound that includes those high performance characteristics that I mentioned before. The kit also comes with absolutely everything that you need for the install, including all of the hardware and even braided stainless steel hoses, as you can see here, which is just going to up the durability of this kit that much more. What you're looking at here on the table, as well as the rest of the hardware that's in the kit, is about $3,300 for the entire system, being a premium choice in the category. Most big brake kits are in that higher price range, just like this one, but others may have some differences that may make you favorite this one over those other options. Now, one of those features being the two-piece rotor design for the extra weight savings, or a 16-inch rotor paired with a red caliper compared to smaller rotors or different color caliper options. Now, if you are looking for a top option when it comes to performance and want to invest in a high-quality braking system, this is going to be a great choice to consider, especially if you want that black on red and the larger rotor, as well as a two-piece rotor out of the kit. Install is more complicated than the average brake replacement, so it does get a 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. I recommend having some specialty tools for this, as well as experience with brakes in order to tackle this job. And if you have all of that, it should take about 4 hours or so. At this point though, whether you are tackling this job or you're just curious about the install, I'm going to kick it over to one of our installers that's going to show you how this is done step by step. So that is going to wrap it up for what I have to say. Let's go ahead and jump into the install.
Tools required for this install include an impact gun, a ratchet, needle nose pliers, a marker, a caliper hook, an extension, T30 torque socket, 1/2-inch socket, 24mm socket, 13 and 21mm swivel socket, 9/16 12-point socket, 11 and 12mm wrenches, an 11/16 inch wrench, 3/8, 7/16, 1/2-inch and 13mm line wrenches, a 1/4-inch wrench, brake lube, brake clean, and a brake bleeding device, and a torque wrench. What's up guys? Today we're installing a big brake kit on our Ram. First we're going to watch a quick uninstall video showing you how to remove your factory caliper and rotor, and then I'll meet you right back here for the install.
All right, so we're gonna go get our front caliper off. The bolts are 16mm bolts on the back side, so we're gonna take them off now. All right, we're gonna take out 2 16mm bolts here and here. All right, we can take our caliper off and hang it up with our caliper tool. Just hanging on the upper control arm here. All right, we're gonna take our flathead screwdriver and just gently pry our pads off. All right, and then we can grab our ratchet with our 21mm socket and take our 2 bolts off for our caliper bracket. All right, now we can take our rotor off. It's held on with a T30 bolt right here. So we're gonna grab a ratchet and our socket and take it off. All right, now you just repeat the same thing for the other side.
So now that we have our factory caliper hanging, we've got quite a bit to assemble on the table before we start mounting anything up onto the truck. Now we have a 2-piece rotor here with a bunch of these little bolts. So we're gonna have to line that up, thread all of our bolts in and tighten that down. And then on the caliper side, I'm gonna be installing our pads as well as our clips. And then the fitting for our brake line, and I'm gonna get the brake line fitted all the way up until this piece that's gonna go into the frame and connect up to our factory hard brake line. So we're gonna start off on our caliper. We're gonna install our brake pads. So we need to apply some grease to these 4 silver shims. So I'm just gonna take a brush and brush it on. And flip it around and get the other side here. And now we're gonna take our pins. These are gonna be installed from the front towards the back. So grab one of your pads, slide it in. And then slide that pin through on both sides. And then you can get the pad for the other side. Line up your pins, slide it all the way through. And then you can put this on the back, and we have our 2 clips that we're going to need to put onto the end of those pins. Now next we're going to install our clips. Now these are going to be used to hold these pins into place so they can't move around. So I'm just going to drop that in, and then take a pair of needle nose pliers and push the other side down and into the groove. And it should snap into place, and then just jiggle your pin around, make sure that can't go anywhere, and that's how you'll know it's fully seated. Do the same thing on the other side now. Now these pins are under a good bit of tension once you're pushing them in, so I want to make sure to keep a hand over that in case it does shoot out, it doesn't hit me in the face. Give that pin a jiggle and that's not coming out, so we're all good there. Next we're going to get our brake line set up. I'm going to set this up all the way to where it connects to the factory hard line. That way we can just disconnect our brake line there and then swap this in real quick so we don't lose a ton of fluid. So you're going to pull off this little cover. And now this piece is what's going to be bolting up to the factory hard line. the 90-degree bend part of the brake line that was included is going to that fitting. So I'm going to thread that on. And then I'm going to grab a 7/16 wrench on that nut. And then I'm going to grab a 13mm line wrench on the nut on the line side and tighten that down. Now that's nice and tight, so we can take our fitting that's going to go into the caliper. We have a longer, thinner side and a shorter, thicker side. The shorter, thicker side is going into the caliper. This side is going to be going into that brake line. So we'll start threading this in. This is an NPT thread, so it's going to get thicker as it goes up higher. So take a 11mm wrench and just thread that in the rest of the way. And then we'll thread our brake line onto that. And now we're going to get this rotated to kind of how it's going to go here. And then take a 7/16 line wrench to tighten down that nut. Next we need to assemble our 2-piece rotor. Now the side that goes on the hub has the threads for the bolt to go into, so we're going to flip that upside down. And now on our rotor, the side that's completely flat is going to be facing down. So just lay that down, just try your best to line up your bolt holes. And then we're going to be using the bolts and flat washers included in the kit. They've got some Loctite on them already. So I'm just going to get all of these started by hand to get everything to line up before I start cranking down on anything. So if you get the two across from each other, everything else will line up. And now just thread in all of your bolts by hand, and then we'll grab a 1/2-inch socket to tighten all of these down. Now grab your 1/2-inch socket. We're going to tighten these down like we were if we were tightening down a wheel. We're just going to go across from each other and then go diagonally to make sure we're tightening this down evenly. So now we're going to install our caliper mounting bracket. Now if you look where the studs are at the base, there's one side that's completely flush with the edge. There's one side where there's a little gap. This gap is going to go towards the knuckle. So we're going to take our bolt with flat washer included in the kit and slide it through the back of the knuckle. And then we're going to take one of these gold shins, put it on the other side of that bolt, and then we'll slide our bracket into place and start threading our bolt into the threaded portion of our bracket. Now go ahead and do that same thing on the bottom. Don't forget to slide your shin in between. Next, we're going to grab a 24mm socket and tighten down those caliper bracket bolts. Now we need to grab a torque wrench set to 120 foot-pounds and tighten down these bolts. So now I went ahead and threw the rotor on backwards here. I threw a lug nut on, hold it in place, and we're gonna torque down all of the bolts that hold our 2-piece rotors together. So you're gonna grab a 1/2-inch socket. I've got a torque wrench set to 25 foot-pounds. I threw it on here because it is pretty difficult to hold it down on the table unless you rigged up something to go through these holes so that you could get some leverage. So now I'm just gonna hold this here and crank down on these. We've got a lot of bolts, so I'm just gonna grab a marker to mark these as I torque them down so I don't miss any. And now with all of those bolts torqued, we're gonna clean this inner surface of our rotor and then we'll flip it around to the correct orientation and clean the front side. I'm gonna pull this lug nut off now so we don't need that anymore. So just take some brake clean, give it a good spray, and then give it a wipe with a clean microfiber. And then flip this around. And then now I'm just gonna throw that lug nut back on to hold the rotor tight against the hub so that we can install our caliper. So now we're ready to mount up our caliper. So we're gonna take 2 of these gold shims. We're gonna slide 1 onto each of our caliper mounting studs. And then we can get our caliper and lay it on. So just line up your 2 bolt holes. Make sure your pads are spread so that they can get over the rotor. And then we're gonna take our silver flat washers and put those on top of the stud. And then we're gonna take our new 12-point nuts, thread those on. Now I'm gonna grab a 9/16 inch 12-point socket and tighten these nuts down, and then we'll torque them. So I'm just threading those on until they bottom out for now. And then throw that socket on your torque wrench, and we're torquing these down to 65 foot-pounds. All right, so now comes the fun part of swapping over our brake lines. We have the nut that we're gonna need to loosen up to separate these lines behind this piece of metal on our upper strut mount. Now I'm gonna loosen up this bolt. I'm not gonna fully remove it so that we still have it held into place so that we have the leverage we need to break that loose. What I am gonna do before that is take a microfiber and just cover everything below that has boots. This brake fluid is pretty corrosive. We're gonna cover that up so it doesn't eat through our axle boot or our end link boot. And now I'm gonna grab a 13mm socket and I'm just gonna loosen up that bolt. So that way we still have it held in so that we have leverage, but we can easily get it out. So now before we undo that, you just want to take your new brake line and raise it up to where it's going to be going in. Make sure that you're not really twisting it to get it into position. If so, you're going to want to loosen up the nut on the back of the caliper and you can actually rotate this whole line. And then once you have it in a spot where it'll go through, tighten it down. So now with that being said, grab yourself a 1/2-inch line wrench. That nut is right behind the metal here. Slide that over, loosen up your nut. And now I can twist that off the rest of the way by hand. I'm gonna fully remove this bolt now. And now we can just drop this whole line out of here. And then quickly grab your new line, slide that through the hole and start threading that nut on. So now once you get those threads started on the back, grab an 11/16 inch wrench to hold the front here, and then that 1/2-inch line wrench to tighten down that nut. Now, the last thing we need to do is put in this retaining clip to hold this nice and still. Now there's this little lip that comes off of this clip that's gonna go back towards the hard line. So get this in that gap there and then push it into place. Now that I have my clip started, I'm gonna use a pry bar up against this upper control arm mount to walk that in. So now grab that brake line of the caliper you just took off. You can remove your microfiber, clean up some of that mess you made, and you can pull your whole caliper off that hook. And now once you're finished on this side, do the same thing on the other side. So now the last thing we need to do is bleed our brakes. Now we have our bleed fitting up here. I've got kind of a homemade brake bleeding device here. I've got a water bottle that I drilled a hole for a tube through. I also drew a second smaller hole for an air relief hole so we don't build up pressure in here while we're forcing fluid out of our brakes. And then I've got my hose that's gonna connect up to that nipple. I've got a 1/4-inch wrench that we're gonna use to open and close the bleeder valve. I'm gonna have a buddy in the car. I'm gonna tell him to pump the brakes. He's gonna hold it. I'm gonna crack open the bleeder and then close it. And then at that point, he can let his foot off and we'll just cycle through that until we have a clear stream of fluid coming out of here with no air bubbles. So now I'm gonna hook my hose up to that nipple. You want your bottle somewhere out of the way, but also sturdy so it doesn't go anywhere. And now I'm gonna tell my buddy to pump up the brakes and hold. Now I'm gonna crack open that bleeder valve. It's got a lot of air in there, so go ahead and pump them up again. Hold. And once again, we had a lot of air in there, so we're just gonna keep going through this until we have a solid stream. Pump them up, hold. And now I've got a nice steady stream of fluid there, so I'm just gonna fully tighten down my bleeder valve. And then you can take your bottle, put this down towards the floor so that all that fluid goes into the bottle and not all over your brakes. And once you're done that, do the same thing for the other one.
So that wraps it up for my review and the full install on the Wilwood Tactical Extreme TX6R front big brake kit with the 16-inch slotted rotors and red calipers fitting all 2019 and newer Ram 1500s. And you can find this exact kit right here at AmericanTrucks.com.